A 25-year-old named Kayla messaged me last month. Steady job, emergency fund already built, no drama in her finances at all. Her question stopped me cold. What else do I need before I can call myself financially free? By the end of this video, you'll have her full answer. I'm 34 now, and here's the part most guys don't know about me. At 25, I was a licensed financial advisor for Bank of America Merrill Lynch. I sat across from real families making real money decisions, watching which habits actually built wealth and which ones quietly wrecked it for decades. Nobody hands you a manual for adulthood. High school gave me trigonometry and a semester of gym class, but not one lesson on taxes, credit, or how compounding actually works. College wasn't much better. If you're 20 and confused about money right now, that's not a personal failure. That's the system. So this video is your one-stop shop, a checklist you can hand to a friend the way Kayla handed her question to me. Think of your 20s like pouring the foundation of a house. Nobody photographs wet concrete, but every wall, every room, everything you build later rests on it. Let's start pouring. Milestone 1, and it's the first slab of the foundation, pay off debt. Or better yet, never take it on in the first place. Chances are if you went to a 4-year school, you graduated with loans attached to your name, maybe credit card balances stacked on top. Before anything else gets poured on this foundation, that debt needs an actual payoff plan, not just good intentions. Here's the number that should sting a little. The average student loan balance in America sits close to $39,000. Not a typo. That's the starting weight strapped to a huge number of 22-year-olds walking across a graduation stage, smiling for photos, with a debt bigger than most used cars quietly following them into their first apartment. Now, federal student loans usually carry interest rates somewhere between 4 and 6%. That's actually not the scariest number in this video, and I want you to remember that rate, because it's about to get compared against something that sounds a lot more exciting, and exciting is exactly where people get talked into bad decisions. Here's where a well-meaning friend chimes in with the classic line, why pay off 6% debt when the market averages 8% a year? On paper, that math sounds airtight. It's the kind of argument that sounds smart in a group chat, gets nodded along to, and quietly convinces a lot of 20-something guys to keep debt on the books longer than they should. Here's the reframe nobody in that group chat says out loud. You can lose money in the market. You cannot lose on paying off debt. Every dollar you put against a 6% loan is a guaranteed 6% return. Locked in. No volatility. No bad year. No crash wiping it out while you're asleep at 31 years old. So here's the actual priority order for this stretch of the foundation. Attack the debt first, before you chase returns you can't control. A guaranteed win beats a maybe every single time when you're this early in the pour. Once that debt is gone, everything else you build on top gets dramatically more stable and honestly, easier to sleep on. Here's the real payoff of killing that debt early, freedom to actually gamble on yourself later. Debt-free at 28, you can walk into a risky startup, a wild business idea, a leap that might pay off 50 times over. Loaded with debt at the same age, you can't afford to swing that big, because one bad month could bury you. And here's the quieter cost, the one nobody puts on a graduation card. Debt turns into a leash. You end up servicing a payment every month, which means you take whatever job pays that bill, not the one that actually teaches you something. I've watched guys stay stuck in work they hated at 29 just because the loan payment demanded it. If you haven't started college yet, this next part matters more than anything I've said so far. Seriously reconsider whether a 4-year school is worth the full price tag. Taking on tens of thousands in debt at 18, before you've even chosen a career, is a massive bet on a future you can't see yet. Ask harder questions before you sign. Here's the workaround almost nobody tells 18-year-olds about. Do 2 years at community college, then transfer into that same 4-year school as a junior. You walk across the same stage, get the exact same diploma, and no employer ever asks where your first 2 years happened. Same result, a fraction of the debt strapped to your name. Foundations poured, debts under control. Milestone 2 is where you actually start earning. Get a job, any job, and stack real experience while the paychecks come in. But here's a small tease before we get there. In a few minutes, I'll walk through a mistake that cost guys $44,000 without them even realizing it. First, let's talk income. One thing to aim for before you turn 30. Land in an industry you can actually see yourself staying in, because the highest earning potential almost always comes from depth, not variety. Bouncing between 5 unrelated fields for a decade rarely outpaces someone who went deep in one lane and became the person everyone else has to call. Think about it like hiring a plumber. Would you rather book the guy on his very first day, or the one who's snaked out 10,000 clogged pipes over 30 years and can diagnose your problem in 90 seconds flat? The market pays for that second guy every time, and your 20s are when you start becoming him, in whatever field you choose. Here's the blunt truth a first paycheck teaches you, that no classroom ever will. Earning money is brutally harder than you think it is right now. You think the obstacle is your resume or your degree. It's not. It's the thousand small hours of actually showing up that nobody warns you about in advance. I'll admit my own delusion here. In high school, I genuinely thought $100,000 a year would be easy money by my mid-20s. Then I actually entered the workforce, started at $40,000, and realized it would take years of grinding to even get close. That gap between expectation and reality is where most guys quit. Don't be that guy. Now we hit the milestone that actually changes everything, so pay attention here. I call it the trifecta, and it's three things that only work as a package deal: delayed gratification, staying out of credit card debt, and building your credit score on purpose. Miss one leg of this trifecta and the other two barely matter. Let's break down each piece. Your 20s are almost always when the first credit card lands in your wallet, and I want to be clear up front. Credit cards are not evil. Used correctly, they're one of the fastest tools you have for building wealth in your 20s. Used carelessly, they're one of the fastest ways to set that foundation back years. The rule is almost embarrassingly simple. Pay the full statement balance every single month, not just the minimum. The minute you start carrying a balance, you step onto a treadmill that's designed to keep you running in place, paying interest on purchases you probably don't even remember making 6 months later. Here's why that treadmill is so brutal. The average credit card interest rate sits around 18%. Compare that to the 4 to 6% on federal student loans we talked about earlier. Carrying credit card debt is roughly 3 times more expensive than the debt everyone panics about, and almost nobody clocks that comparison. Stay disciplined with that card and you build something valuable most 20-somethings ignore: a strong credit score. That score is the key to lower interest rates on every future mortgage, car loan, and even faster approval on apartment rentals. It sounds boring right now. It will not feel boring the day you're staring at a loan offer. Remember that $44,000 mistake I teased earlier? Here it is. On a $400,000 mortgage, a 5% rate costs about $373,000 in interest over 30 years. Bump that to 5.5% from weaker credit, and interest climbs to around $417,000, a $44,000 gap from half a point. Here's the part that should genuinely scare you a little. This system barely tolerates mistakes. Pay on time 99 times out of 100, and your score still doesn't reward you like an honor student. It treats that one miss like a real strike against you. There's no partial credit in this game, pun fully intended. So here's the fix, and it takes about 10 minutes total. Put every single bill on autopay. Rent, utilities, the credit card statement, all of it. Removing your own memory from the equation is the single easiest way to guarantee you never take a hit on your score from simply forgetting a due date. The last leg of the trifecta is delayed gratification, and the whole idea rests on one principle. A dollar you don't spend today is worth more than a dollar tomorrow, because it gets time to grow. The more capital you stack while you're young, the bigger the base your entire financial foundation eventually stands on. Let's make this real with two guys, Person A and Person B. Neither invests a dime between 20 and 30. They just save. Person A puts away $500 every month. Person B, slightly more disciplined, puts away $750 every month. Same decade, same income bracket roughly. Very different habit. Run that habit for 10 straight years and here's where they land at 30. Person A has $60,000 saved and ready to invest. Person B has $90,000. That's a $30,000 gap built entirely from an extra $250 a month, the price of maybe a couple nice dinners out. Now invest both piles at 8% a year until age 65. No more contributions needed. Person A ends up with roughly $887,000. Person B ends up with over $1.33 million. That $30,000 head start becomes a $443,000 difference. If numbers like that are hitting different than the usual vague self-help advice, subscribe. I put out exactly this kind of talk, regularly. Milestone 4 moves us to the next layer poured on top of that foundation. Pick an actual savings goal. A house down payment, a wedding, a dream vacation, or capital to take a real risk on a business. A vague goal like save more never works. A specific number with a deadline attached actually does. Here's why a real number matters so much. A savings goal forces you to work backward into an actual budget, instead of just hoping money is left over at the end of the month. When you know you need $30,000 in 18 months, suddenly your daily spending stops being random and starts being math. The engine behind all of this is living below your means, which is really just delayed gratification wearing a different outfit. As your income climbs through your 20s, keep your spending roughly flat, and the gap between what you earn and what you spend becomes the fuel that funds every one of these bigger goals. I've tracked my own expenses since 2014, so I can prove this isn't theory. I started out spending about $1,500 a month on discretionary stuff, while earning somewhere around $45,000 to $50,000 a year. My income has grown a lot since then. My monthly spending basically hasn't moved. You'd think a bigger income means a bigger lifestyle bump should follow. It doesn't have to, and here's the reframe. New shoes, new clothes, a nicer car, they all spike your happiness for a few weeks at most. Then you're right back to your normal baseline, except now you've also drained the account that could have funded something that actually matters. This next milestone is the one most guys skip, and it's the one that makes every other number in this video actually work. Build a real, written budget, not a rough guess in your head, an actual document that tracks where every single dollar of your paycheck is going, every single month, without exception. Here's the homework, and it only takes about an hour. Pull up your bank and credit card statements and sort every single expense into one of two buckets. Rent, utilities, car insurance, and health insurance are needs. Netflix, coffee runs, and impulse takeout orders are wants. Nothing gets to hide in a gray area. Once it's sorted, apply the 50-30-20 rule. 50% of your income goes toward needs, 30% toward wants, and 20% straight into savings and future investing. It's not a perfect formula for every single situation, but it's an honest starting split that keeps this foundation level instead of leaning in one direction. Let's put real numbers on it. Say you're bringing home $5,000 a month after tax. $2,500 covers your needs. Rent, utilities, insurance. $1,500 covers your wants. Going out, hobbies, whatever you enjoy. The last $1,000 goes straight into savings, on purpose, every single month, no exceptions. With debt handled, a budget running, and hopefully an emergency fund sitting in the bank, we arrive at the milestone that actually changes your entire trajectory: investing. This is where the foundation stops just holding weight and starts actively growing on its own. And in a minute, I'll get into the account that can quietly make you a millionaire without you noticing. In America, there are two retirement accounts almost everyone in their 20s should know by name: the Roth IRA, an individual account you open yourself, and the 401k, an account offered through your employer. Both come in traditional and Roth versions, and the difference between those two versions is about to matter a lot more than you'd expect. Here's the one piece of the tax code that feels like a loophole nobody told you about. Inside a Roth IRA, every dollar you invest grows completely tax-free, and when you retire, you withdraw the entire balance, gains included, without owing the government a single cent. That's not a rounding error. That's decades of growth you get to keep, in full, forever. Now here's the catch, because the government doesn't hand out a deal this good without limits. If you're under 50 years old, you can only put $6,000 a year into a Roth IRA. Miss that window and you can't go back and make it up later. That cap is exactly why starting in your 20s, even with small amounts, beats waiting until your 30s with bigger paychecks. Once you cross 50, the rules loosen slightly. The government allows you to contribute $7,000 a year instead of $6,000. An extra $1,000 built in specifically as a catch-up mechanism for people who started late or fell behind. It's a decent cushion, but it's nowhere near enough to make up for 2 lost decades of compounding you never got back. To even qualify for a Roth IRA, you need what's called earned income, meaning money you made working for an employer, for yourself, or for a business you actually own. Opening one takes minutes at a brokerage like Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, Wealthfront, or Acorns. You link your bank account, transfer money in, and then you still have to actually buy investments with it. Now flip to the other major account, the 401k. Unlike the Roth IRA, this one only exists if your employer offers it as a benefit, and in the traditional version, every dollar you contribute comes out of your paycheck before taxes are taken. You're not avoiding the tax bill, you're postponing it. Betting your tax rate will be lower once you retire, and the ceiling on this account is a lot higher than the Roth. Back in 2022, the 401k contribution limit hit $20,500 a year, more than 3 times what a Roth IRA allows. That gap alone is why so many financial advisors tell you to treat your 401k as the primary engine and the Roth as the accelerant. Here's the part nobody warns you about. Pull money out of your 401k before age 59 and a half, and on top of taxes, the government hits you with an early withdrawal penalty. A guy I know pulled $12,000 out at 29 for a car repair and a vacation, and lost nearly $4,000 of it instantly. Treat that account like it's welded shut until retirement. Here's the reframe most guys miss completely. If your employer offers a 401k match, contributing up to that match isn't investing, it's collecting money that's already yours. Put in 5%, and if your company matches it dollar for dollar, that's an automatic 100% return before the market does anything at all. Walking away from that isn't caution, it's leaving your own paycheck behind. Here's something that trips people up constantly. You don't have to choose between these two accounts. You're allowed to run both at once. Max out your employer match in the 401k first, since that's free money. Then push extra savings into a Roth IRA for the tax-free growth on top. Together, they become 2 separate engines quietly compounding in the background while you're out living your actual life. So once the accounts exist, what actually goes inside them? For most people, the answer is an index fund, something like an S&P 500 ETF. Buy one share, and you instantly own a small sliver of all 500 of the biggest companies in America, spread across every major industry. It costs a fraction of buying those stocks individually, and it hands you instant diversification without needing to guess which single company wins. Here's a number that should calm you down. Looking back across roughly the last 80 years, index funds have averaged close to 8% in annual returns. Some years crash, some years soar, but zoom out far enough and that average holds remarkably steady. That's the number turning a few $100s a month into a real retirement. Not luck, not stock picking, only time and a steady contribution left alone to do its job. This next one changes everything about how you should behave when the market drops. Bank of America found that missing only the 10 best days in the market each decade, from selling out of fear, cut returns to around 45% instead of the roughly 20,000% you'd gain staying fully invested. The best days almost always follow the worst ones, meaning panic during a crash quietly destroys people's future wealth. So here's where it all lands. Once your money's in, the job isn't clever, it's leaving it alone and letting 80 years of history keep doing what it's always done. Stop checking the balance every time the news gets loud, and let the account you built in your 20s become the freedom you wanted in your 30s. If this hit different than the usual noise, subscribe and grab the free newsletter linked below for more.